Okay, so just so everybody can follow along, uh, just type Y in the chat feature if you can hear me. I just want to make sure everything is working. If you can hear my voice, please just type Y in the chat feature. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to get started. Again, my name is Martin Ricard. I'm the communication specialist for AFSCME Council 57. And for today's webinar, we're going to cover how to use communications to win your local's next contract campaign. This can also be used for just any other type of campaign that we're involved in as a union. This could be a rally, a march on the boss, things of that nature. All of these tactics, these communications tactics, work the same way. And before we start, I just wanted to remind everybody of a few housekeeping things. I like for these webinars to be very interactive. So I encourage people to tweet during and after the webinar using the hashtag #OurUnion, Our Future. This is, if you're taking notes, this helps you, point out some things that you might have found interesting. Also, this just lets other folks in the union know or other supporters know that we're on the move as AFSCME. Next, I do want to encourage people to ask questions. Just know that there's a Q&A section at the very end, and you can also use the chat feature in this webinar to ask questions and raise other things throughout the webinar. So feel free to interact with me. And then also just know that this is recording. So if there is something that you feel that you missed, I will be emailing this webinar after the fact. So for those who are in this live, you're in for a treat because I'm going to be revealing some secrets that you may not have heard or you may not have heard this way before. So hopefully you'll get a lot out of this. I also just want to point out that this isn't a training about organizing. Okay, so while there's topics here, or this topic is related to organizing, right? Because that's what we do. I just want to point out that we'll not be going over specific organizing topics in this webinar. I'm going over things about communications, and you'll kind of see how they're separate but related. But again, this is about communications and about helping you win your campaigns using communications. All right, so let me just start by giving you a couple of examples of what I'm talking about in terms of how communications is used with winning campaigns or new contracts, right? So one of the things that's been effective is bargaining updates. Now you'll see these two examples here. They look almost identical, and that's for a reason. There's a reason why bargaining updates like this are very effective. If you'll look at the top of both examples, you'll see that there's a title. Usually it's on the shorter side, and it's not just any old regular title, right? It's not just bargaining update number 1 or here's what you missed. It gives people a specific update about what's going on, and also a call to action. You're going to hear me say that a lot throughout this webinar, but a call to action is very important because it brings clarity around the issue, and especially because a lot of the work that we do is about building solidarity, and one of the main things that's helpful with building solidarity is establishing just clarity on what are we actually fighting for and what are we trying to accomplish. So you'll get that with this kind of title, right? Some other things just to point out are you'll see a nice photo. And again, this doesn't have to be professional all the time, but a nice photo, what I'm talking about is a photo that just shows, number one, people. Usually, we might be on a picket line or in a rally or in a group meeting. Usually, photos with a lot of people in it work the best. And you'll notice something too. While we know that unions are on the front lines of fighting for lots of issues, Everybody isn't always, throwing up the solidarity fist. I mean, obviously, one of these examples, folks are holding up picket signs, but that always doesn't need to be the case. I think the main thing is that you want to show that there are people involved and people behind whatever the campaign is. So that's very important as well. And again, it doesn't have to be a professional photo, but having some type of photo will help get the message across. That's the whole point of having these bargaining updates. And then two other quick things just to point out. You'll see that there's always usually a date or another event or another thing for people to get involved with. You always want to make that clear and point that out to people to help build solidarity throughout a campaign. And then you'll see some text there, usually like two, maybe three paragraphs, just kind of explaining, wrapping up, what took place. It's good if you can include a quote from a member, just to drive the message home again. And then you also just want to tell people what's next. So these are just some good examples of bargaining updates, and these are some of the communications tools that we've used in the past that are pretty effective. All right, let's talk about Eblasts. So Eblasts is just another tool in our toolkit. And the reason why Eblasts are important, I mean, we're in the age of information. Obviously, it's good to talk to people, but one of the things to reinforce the point when you are embarking on a campaign is, we want to send out emails to people because that's also going to be one of the most effective ways to reach people. And again, what you'll notice in an example like this, it's not a generic message. It just drives the message home. And again, it includes a call to action. That's going to be always very important when you're doing anything communications related. And what's interesting about an E-Blast is that you'll notice that there's only one area that's highlighted as a link. That's very important with an E-Blast. It becomes very hard if you give people too much to do. So a best practice is to include one call to action, whether it's, hey, sign this petition or RSVP for the next event or, something like that. And then just make that the focus of that email. And again, the email, the e-blast doesn't have to be too long, but usually using this tactic is very effective as well. All right, so another tactic is actually a little bit more creative. It's a landing page, right? And just to give you some background of how this tactic was used, I remember having a conversation with a local chapter, some time ago, and they actually were they're working on a new contract in the middle of a campaign, and they wanted to do something online, right? But they didn't have a website, which is, that's a common problem. And instead of basically just building a new website, which sometimes can be very time intensive, or if you don't know what you're doing, it could be expensive and it may not be effective, right? So instead of building an entirely new built out website, what we did instead was we built a landing page, which is essentially a one-page website that has, again, the main common theme of the day is call to action, right? It has a call to action, one-page website with a call to action. And the call to action with this particular landing page was, hey, view the contract. This particular chapter had just reached a tentative agreement, and instead of just saying, hey, everybody, hope to see you at the ratification vote, they took the proactive step of building a landing page, gave people the opportunity to view the contract beforehand so everybody was informed. And then as a very creative tactic, a very creative communications tactic, when people clicked on this that blue view contract button, they were prompted to provide some information so that they're able to get the information right there. When they put in their email address, the name, and maybe some other information about what they do, they were able to download the contract immediately. And then the local, in turn, had that information so that with future communications, they'll have up-to-date information. So this is actually very creative. tactic. And again, it's very, very effective. I would encourage more locals to try out this particular tactic. And you might be surprised, doing a landing page is a lot less, well, let me put it this way, it's a lot more affordable than actually trying to maintain a full website. Okay, and then I also wanted to mention that video messages are very, very important. Again, you don't need to be a professional per se, but video messages are they can be very effective when you are going public with your message, when you want to direct the attention to, let's say, politicians, or just even the public who might not really understand the people or the issues behind the campaign. And so we've used video messages a lot during the campaign to just basically let members speak on the issue and share their personal stories. These are very, very effective. And again, another tactic that you can use for communications for any type of campaign, right? So after looking at these examples, I just want to take a quick poll of the audience. Okay, so when do you think is the best time to think about communications during a campaign? And you can type in your answer in the chat feature. So A, do you think the beginning is the best time? B, do you think the middle is the next time? Or C, right before you go on strike? And I'll give you about 30 seconds. Okay, I'm hearing A. Anybody else? I'm hearing A. I'll give us about 15 more seconds. I'm hearing A again. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, really all of the above. I got you. Okay, so the correct answer is, as folks were typing in, A. It's not always obvious, but basically, or it might sound a little strange, right? To think about communications right at the beginning when you have the issue might be so large, or it might seem so challenging that your focus might be on other things, right? But depending on how you look at it, here's why that question is important. When it comes to going head to head with a powerful force like management, right? In this age of information that we're living in, it's all about the battle of the story. Okay, so what do I mean by that? It's literally like what you see in this image. It's literally a tug of war. Anytime that you're embarking on a campaign, anytime you are sort of going against the grain, right? Which is a lot of times what we're doing. It's a tug of war, right? So whenever you're seeking a fair contract or better benefits or a more secure retirement, you're literally engaging in a tug of war. And it's usually against management. It's usually against politicians. It's against anti-union people, billionaires, right? And even sometimes it's against the public, right? Sometimes all at once, like sometimes all of the above, right? And so how do you engage in this communications battle without being manhandled? That's really the crux of what I'm trying to get across with this webinar, right? How do you engage effectively in this battle without getting manhandled? And so you first have to just understand how the game is played. Here's what I mean by that. Here's the game that goes on with a lot of our things. All right, so there's their story, and then there's our story. And here's what I mean by that. So their story, you're very familiar with this. Their story, here's what they do. What they do is their job in this battle is to maintain the dominant narrative. What does the dominant narrative sound like a lot of times? Well, the dominant narrative is that we take care of our employees. Everybody is happy. We're all, because we do public service, we provide a service for the community. That means everybody is for the community, and everybody is happy, right? This is the dominant narrative. And then how do they How do they maintain this dominant narrative? They do that by spreading myths. What do those myths sound like? We all hear them a lot of times with contracts, right? A lot of times it's, we don't have enough, or sometimes it's, well, other unions have already agreed to this offer, so the offer that we're putting on the table is very generous, right? Things like that, things that we know aren't necessarily true, but this is what the public believes. This is what everybody starts to believe about unions. This is why we always hear messages about union members being lazy and wanting too much money and things like that. We know that's not true, but because their job in this game is to maintain the dominant narrative, that's a lot of times why they might win that particular battle, right? But here's where our role comes in with this whole battle of the story, right? Our job is to challenge the dominant narrative, and our job is to disrupt these underlying assumptions, right? That lead to these myths being spread about who are union members, who's in a union, why unions are important, right? And so one of the best ways to disrupt those underlying myths that are almost always going to be spread by management and picked up by the media. And this is probably the most important part of this webinar, right? Here's how we do this. So one, we're gonna tell our story. I'm gonna be saying that a lot over the next few minutes, but here's how you do it. The best ways to tell your story are, number one, make it compelling. What do I mean by that? There's a lot of times with when we're dealing with contract issues, or any time where our members might be being mistreated or just misunderstood. What happens a lot of times, especially from management, is they'll come out with a lot of facts and figures, and it makes it look like there's either no money, or there's no way that anybody could understand what union members are trying to bring to the table, right? Because our jobs, we're on the ground, we're in the field, we know what's going on in the communities that we serve, and our voices aren't always heard. Well, one of the ways to counter that is to make your story compelling. Why not take somebody in that hospital wing, or in that community where the service is being provided, and show people exactly what's going on, show people what the issue is, show people why healthcare is a very important issue, things like that. Make it compelling. You don't always have to counter facts and figures with facts and figures of your own. A lot of times you can just tell a more compelling story. Here's another way. Use strong examples that show people's lives at stake, right? And this is kind of what I was saying. A lot of times, instead of just trying to counterbalance the dominant narrative with something that you feel like needs to be more intelligent or things like that, basically just show strong examples. Strong examples can include your story. Strong examples can include stories of the people that you help in the public, things like that. Those are always going to be stronger examples. Somebody can tell the story of their family member who might be affected by a contract issue that just is plain out wrong. Things like that. And then obviously a third way of telling your story is to show, don't tell. Again, this just reinforces that it's not always the best tactic to counter facts and figures with more facts and figures. And here's what I mean. One of the best examples that I've seen lately of this tactic is with the Oakland teacher strike. One of the things that they did, I saw this went viral actually during their strike that happened recently, right? So instead of they had a few issues. Obviously, they were looking for a pay raise, but they were also trying to connect with the community that the strike was about smaller class sizes, right? So instead of just saying, hey, we need smaller class sizes, this particular teacher went to social media and showed people what smaller class sizes would actually look like. And so like he starts off by telling people, hey, here's what 15 students looks like in a classroom. Here's what 20 students looks like in the classroom, right? And then he gets into 40 students, right? And then as you can actually see what he's trying to describe, which is that the classroom is very hard to manage after a certain point. And this is why you need to have smaller class sizes. And that, you know, this particular tactic worked very well. And this is what I mean by show, not tell. And so as you can see, as he gets to like 45 students, he's like, okay, I'm feeling like my life is in danger right now. And you can actually see this is hard for one particular person to manage this amount of kids. So just imagine if you did this with what you do at your job. You know, we hear a lot about how you know, a lot of agencies are depleting resources. You know, and our members are having to do more with less. You can actually show what that looks like, so people actually understand that, instead of you know, maybe not really understanding what your jobs are and how much work that entails, and you know, how effective you can really be with your job. So always show, don't tell. And this is what I mean by that, right? All right. So I mentioned at the beginning that there's three particular tools that are going to be very effective, that you're going to want to use in every campaign that you launch, whether it's a contract campaign, a rally that you're trying to do, anything of that nature, another blitz. There's the tactics that you may not know about, but these are the ones that you want to use, and you want to use them from the beginning. The first one is just a statement. Now, again, it doesn't have to be exactly like this, but and again, this will be recorded so you can kind of take a look at this. But basically, a statement is kind of like your almost like a mission statement, or like a, you know, like a calling card of what is this issue really about. I think it's very important for us, as we're building campaigns, as we're trying to change things at the workplace, as we're trying to change things in the community. We want to be clear right from the jump. Okay, this is what the issue is about. This is why it's important, and this is why we're bringing it to the table. And if you just take a little bit of time to just kind of write out a statement, or, you know, even just talk about it, this becomes the same message that you can repeat and repeat over and over again throughout the campaign. This is one of the things that's really going to help people, like I said, build solidarity, but also it will just create clarity in the message, so that everybody is speaking with one voice. That's the main point of having a statement like this. Okay, the second tool is essentially an op-ed, or a letter to the editor. Now, again, you don't have to be a great writer or anything like that, but this is all about sharing your voice, showing, not telling. This is all about you know, showing people that there's a human behind these services that we provide. And even though newspapers are basically, they're a dying industry, one of the best ways we can actually still use newspapers to our advantage is by writing op-eds or letters to the editor. And they're going to vary by publication. Usually a letter to the editor is shorter in length, usually about like 150 words at the most. An op-ed is a little bit longer, usually about like 400 words or something like that. But having an op-ed or a letter to the editor during the campaign will help, especially with the public. This will help connect our issues with the public's issues, and that's really what we want to do. We don't want to always just keep things at the negotiating table or behind closed doors, because nowadays people don't always buy that you know, that whatever the union does is not the public's business, right? Some of the things you want to get out there in the public, and one of the ways to do that is with an op-ed or letter to the editor. Okay, and then lastly, social media. We live in a digital world, and as you can see in these examples, here's what social media does, especially with the campaign. As I mentioned, this is all a battle of the story. So it's either going to be their story that wins, or it's going to be our story that wins. And the best way to make sure that our story wins is that we tell our own story. And this is what social media can do. So all of our locals should or could have their own social media page, whether that's on Facebook or Twitter. Some people might even go on Instagram, right? Or you can even go on YouTube if you're up for that. But by basically telling our own story on social media, this allows us to own that narrative, and it's going to be more effective as you're advancing in your campaign. And all of these examples that I'm showing here, all of these were successful campaigns, and they all included a lot of social media. So that's always going to be very, very important. All right. So just to wrap it up, here, I mean, usually I have more takeaways, but the essential key takeaway of this webinar and of this information is to tell more stories. Whether it's with a flyer or a social media post, a video, email, anything like that. Obviously, like I said, organizing is going to be the most important part. But what you'll understand, what you'll realize is that one of the things that is going to make that organizing more effective is if we tell our stories better. And so that's one of the things that I want to just encourage everybody to do, is that when you're thinking of the next campaign that your local wants to launch, or any issue that we need to make public, tap into the stories. We all, in AFSCME, we represent all kinds of jobs. We do all kinds of things from all walks of life. We have so many stories to tell. And if we just tell those stories, we can make a better connection with the people that we're trying to reach. Okay, so with that being said, I want to open it up in the last, I'll just say 5 or 10 minutes. If anybody has any questions, or you want me to explain something a little bit more, feel free to either type it into the chat, or I believe some of the audio might be on as well. So again, if you have any questions, let me know. All right. One more time, just if there's any questions, feel free to put it into the chat or let me know. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for joining me on this webinar. I try to do these regularly, and I hope you got something out of this. And again, let's go out, let's tell our story, and let's go win some campaigns. And I'll see you next time. Bye.